Hey there, everybody. Jeff Danlick here with OurCuriousWorld.com, bringing you stories of the mysterious, the unexplained, and the just plain weird. This is my first video, as you can probably tell, so I hope you'll be forgiving. But I'm just going to have some fun with it and see where it goes, and I hope you'll join me on this journey, see what happens. Anyway, today we're going to look at one of the most famous relics in the world, the Holy Grail. What is it? Is it real? Does it actually exist? Can we still see it today? Let's dive into it and find out. Those of you who like the Indiana Jones trilogy, well, they have more than three now, but the third one, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, was my favorite. And in it, there's a scene in which Indy's father, played by Sean Connery, was shot by the Nazis and he's dying. And Indy takes the cup that they have found, they call the Holy Grail, and it has magical powers. They put some water into it, and he dumps this water onto the bullet wound, and it just immediately dissolves and saves Indy's father's life, which I thought was really cool. There's a picture of the Grail they used in the movie. You can see it's pretty plain looking, probably pretty close to what it would have looked like back in the first century, a cup like that. So they did a good job. But where did they get the idea that this cup exists and it has holy powers? Those of you who aren't familiar with the story, the Holy Grail was the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper, or the Passover dinner that he had with his disciples the night before he was arrested and crucified. It's recounted in all four of the Gospels, so you can look that up yourself if you want. In any case, during the meal, Jesus stood among his disciples. He took his glass of wine, he raised it, and he said, "This is my blood." And obviously, it was a metaphor, but it says, when you drink it, drink it in remembrance of me. And that became the basis for what we call today communion, or the Eucharist, still practiced 2,000 years later. It all came down to that one scene in the Bible. What's interesting about the cup is that, well, first of all, why do they call it the Grail? Have you ever thought about that? Well, because most of the writing about it came out of France around the Middle Ages. And the French word for cup is grail. So it's as simple as that. Nobody really talked about the cup much. It wasn't a big deal in the church in the first 1,000 years or so. Until the Middle Ages. And it was a gentleman by the name of Chrétien de Troyes. You can tell I don't speak French. He wrote a short poem called Percival, the Pursuit of the Cup, or the story of the Grail, actually. And anyway, shortly afterwards, French poet Robert de Baron wrote the Grail in his work Joseph of Arimathea, which he maintained that this figure from the New Testament had gotten hold of the cup and used it to catch the blood from Christ as he hung on the cross. So those were the first early mentions of the Grail, and it was expounded upon by other writers through the Middle Ages into the Renaissance. It's actually the basis for a lot of King Arthur and the Round Table stories, with Sir Galahad always being off looking for this thing on his various quests. The question is this thing real? Did it really happen? Does it still exist today? There are a couple of places that claim to actually have this cup in their possession. Probably the most famous and the one with the best pedigree is the Cathedral of Valencia, Spain, which houses the Holy Chalice of Valencia. This is a small, dark red cup that was made out of agate. And you can see it here in this picture. It's the little tiny cup at the top, encased in this larger golden case that was made later to house it. It's made out, like I said, out of a red agate, probably forged or carved sometime between the 2nd century BC and 1 AD, probably in Egypt somewhere. So it's from about the right time period. There's a story how it came to be in Valencia. It was supposedly brought to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Rome by St. Peter. And he used it along with subsequent popes to do the Eucharist Mass for the next while. About 258 AD, Pope Sixtus had it given to his deacon, St. Lawrence, to take the cup out of and protect it from persecution from the Emperor Valerian, who apparently was on a terror against Christians at that time. No one really knew where it was until around 1134. It was located in the monastery at San Juan de la Peña, who later gave that cup that they found to who did they give it to? They gave it to King Martin I of Aragon, and he took it with him to Valencia. And from there, he ended up having to sell a bunch of his possessions to pay off his debts, and so he sold the cup to the church, and they put it into the Cathedral of Valencia around 1437, which is where it's been ever since. So today, it's still venerated and visited by millions of people, well, thousands, I don't know. And it's even been used by some of the popes to perform a Eucharist service. Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict both used it not too long ago. So it's considered a big deal in the Catholic Church, and is considered by many people to have been the actual cup that Christ used. However, it's not the only cup. There's also another one. This one is made out of green onyx, and it exists in the St. Isidore's Basilica in Leon, Spain. It's known as the Chalice of Doña Aracha, which is also supposed to be, now it's also supposed to be the true Grail. It's a little bit more murky about how this one came to be. It apparently came out of the Holy Land sometime in the distant past, and it was traded by various Muslim merchants, finally given to the King Ferdinand I of Leon, sometime in the mid-11th century. It came into his possession. And then he also had it put into a golden case, like you can see here. They were big on putting these things inside of some sort of ornate casing. And it's been there ever since. Like the other cup, it was also created probably sometime around the 1st century, likely in Egypt also, which was known for this kind of craftsmanship. So they both have that going for them. They're both about the right time period. There are also other churches, however, who have cups that they purport to be the Grail, the real cup. Some of them are made out of wood, some are made out of stone, but they all have their own claim to fame, so to speak. So they obviously can't all be the real cup. Since what's going on here, we'll have to look at that in a minute and see. So let's talk a little bit more about the cup itself. How did it really come into being? What really would have happened? So if you look at the gospel accounts, what happened was that Jesus had sent his disciples on ahead of the group to rent a hall or a room for their Passover dinner. Passover was one of the most important feasts in Judaism, still is today. So they were, being good Jews, that they were going to celebrate this meal. They would have rented a hall from someone who did this professionally. This probably like an early bed and breakfast, except there was no bed and there was no breakfast. But you get the idea. They would have rented this out. The host would have provided all the food and all the utensils and everything. And the disciples would have come. They would have sat on the floor on cushions around a kind of a communal dinner. They would have had wine and bread and all kinds of stuff like that, and passed it around. So the question is, did Jesus actually get up and make this proclamation? And if he did the disciples realize how important it was and so want to keep the cup as a kind of a memento? The chances are unlikely. The reason is that, first of all, this account was not recorded until like 40 years after Jesus' death. So at the time, there would have been no way of really understanding how important this artifact would have been. So it's unlikely that any of the disciples would have kept it. It would have been indistinguishable from everyone else's cup. By the way, here's what the cups at the time would have looked like. You'll see they would have been made out of terracotta or clay, sometimes stone. Cups made out of onyx or agate or steel or gold would have been really only for royalty or the very wealthiest. So it's unlikely that the cups in Spain are actually the ones that would have been used at a meal like this. It simply wouldn't have been affordable to the people who were running this thing. There's also a story that Peter might have kept one of the cup itself. How he would distinguish it from the other cups at the dinner afterwards is kind of a mystery. And there's no evidence that he actually absconded with this thing. So that's just a bit of church folklore that has no basis in fact. And then what happened to the cup? Well, after the meal was over, it was probably collected along with all the other dinnerware and hopefully washed and probably used in the future by other people until it eventually became broken and was discarded. So as a result, there probably is no cup anymore, not in any form we would know it. If it is, it's buried somewhere in Israel and probably never will be found. So where did this idea that the Holy Grail exists come from? Why do we have these artifacts? You got to remember, during the Middle Ages, there was a big market for holy relics. Every church, every cathedral wanted to have a piece of the true cross, or the thorns that Jesus wore on his head, or the spear that pierced his side. And many of them had claims that they had these parts of these artifacts in their possession. Obviously, the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper would have been really huge. Anybody would have wanted that one. The churches would have fought over it. So there were people out there who were very accommodating. They would either find these artifacts and pass them off as having been the ones that were actually used, or they would have created something of their own and sold it for exorbitant prices to the church, who had, of course, all the money to afford this kind of thing. So as a result, there are a lot of these sort of artifacts out there today. Many churches in Europe, for example, have a piece of the real cross, and then if you put all the wood together that they say they have, they probably have a piece of lumber that weighs 1,000 pounds. In any case, the Grail itself probably no longer exists, if it ever did. And so there's no reason to go looking for it. So if you're thinking on heading out on an adventure looking for the Holy Grail, I would advise you not to do it. You're probably just going to waste your time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Sorry about bursting your bubble, all you Grail lovers out there, but I just have to tell you what I found. If you like this video, though, please hit the like and subscription buttons so we can see more stories about this curious world. I look forward to doing more of these in the future, and I hope you'll enjoy them too. We're going to talk about stuff besides holy relics, of course. We're going to talk about all kinds of unusual, mysterious things in this world, and I hope that you'll come along on this ride. So until next time, remember that whatever you do, always give it 100%, unless you're giving blood or something. That would be a bad idea. Till next time, this is Jeff Delick signing out. Bye.